This is a tangent, but that's the thing that always kind of, got me about Thomas. Probably what got me blocked by Isaiah Thomas on Twitter as well. But I used to, and like you, I enjoyed the IT experience as much as anybody. The King in the Fourth crap, that nickname, it drove me crazy. And looking at his freaking wrist as if he was wearing all that stuff, like that bothered me. But the thing that I feel like not enough people acknowledged was that, okay, I mean, sure, he might score 22 points for you in a random fourth quarter, but how many points did the Celtics give up? He had to score that many points because they were also getting killed on the other end, and he contributed to that. So not enough people, I think, we were blinded by that little guy stuff of, him going out and dominating and putting up MVP caliber numbers and top 5 in the voting and a lovable guy and back up the Brinks truck and chip on his shoulder and all that stuff. But it was also, okay, I mean, keep in mind, he's also hurting you as much as he's helping you, you could argue.
Yeah, and I will say, I think it shouldn't be underrated, one, how he kind of galvanized the guys around him.
Absolutely.
I think, in his role, he was, the guys loved him. He was extremely inspirational, I think, in that way. And two, they really assumed his identity. Those Celtics teams were chip on your shoulders teams. Mm-hmm. You go back to Jay Crowder. Yep. They had just guys up and down that roster Marcus Smart, who were chip on your shoulder, play real hard. And I think in a lot of ways they were really embodying, the mentality that IT brought. And that really, really worked. That's kind of an intangible thing. But I think it really mattered a lot to those teams. But on the 2019-20 Boston Celtics, he would not be that guy anymore. And at that point, are you sort of negating, some of the things that made him so successful in Boston, just because he's not that guy anymore? Is he less valuable, in a bench role because this team's identity is already sort of what it is? And I think there's a lot to that. And I also just he's, like you said, he was a bad defender before. He is almost a hopeless defender at this point, and it's tough to see how he contributes this season.
That's the thing that's so wild about people also obsessing over Jamal Crawford, who again, just he's exactly. a name more than anything else. Jamal Crawford, who both followed and unfollowed me on Twitter in a span of about 2 hours this week, by the way, probably because he saw something that I tweeted about him, which was not favorable, which, I wasn't mean. It was just like, hey, this guy, there's a reason he doesn't have a job. He's 39 years old. His 3-point numbers last year when he did finally land on a team were down as compared to what they were throughout his, career when he was more than serviceable, downright dynamic off the bench, and his defense, which was already not good, is, taken a wild step back. So these aren't the guys clearly that fans should be focusing on, that we should be focusing on, most importantly, that Danny Ainge should be focusing on. But then it gets interesting when you start to talk about the likes of a Tristan Thompson, if he were to come available, and some think, hey, you got that championship experience. If you can lure him as opposed to the Rockets grabbing him or something like that, it makes a lot of sense. But I also do go back to this, and maybe it is that chemistry conversation. You got to get rid of a guy. So if you're bringing in somebody like that, or anybody else for that matter, and you can tell me what you think of Thompson, whether that's a move you would make or Ainge would make, more importantly, I guess, but who goes? Is it Javonte Green? Is it Vincent Poirier, who they also are, invested in for next year? Because someone needs to move, and it would just be an outright release because you can't make a trade.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that, I think Thompson is a guy that you definitely should keep an eye on. He would certainly add to that bench. He would help against, he would help against Philly. He would help against Milwaukee, I think. He would do some useful things. I think in that scenario, you're probably cutting Poirier. He's just, it would be tough because the guy came over here from, overseas to give the NBA a shot, and the Celtics really had to try to convince him to come over. But, he'd be kind of the expendable one there. I think they do want to hang on to Javonte. He's been really good this year. Like I said, he's been really good in the locker room. I think he's somebody who they would probably try to keep. But yeah, I mean, the Thompson one's going to be tough because there will be a lot of teams who have interest in him. And again, like I said before, they don't have any extra money to throw around at him. So it would be like a minimum deal and, come showcase yourself for the playoffs type thing. And, we would see how that would go. I personally still kind of think that if the trade deadline went the way it did, I wouldn't be surprised if the buyout market is really quiet. It feels like, these guys, they love their team. You talk to anybody in the they like everybody up and down the roster. It just kind of feels like this is a year that there might not be somebody available who moves the needle for them, especially on the buyout market. If Ainge is talking this way about not being able to find someone on the trade market who could crack the playoff rotation, the buyout market's even less likely. So, maybe they make a move for depth. Maybe they try to make a small upgrade. But personally, I could see the buyout market going by very quiet, and they continue to roll with this team that, like you said, has won 7 in a row and 10 of 11.
The thing that drives me absolutely bonkers, and this is not just the Celtics, this is any team, any sport for that matter, after a trade deadline, when you start to hear the spin of a team didn't make a move, but I'll tell you what, if we get healthy, that's like a trade deadline acquisition. And now I'm going to be a hypocrite because I'm going to ask the question: if Robert Williams does get healthy enough to contribute to this team, because again, Ainge said it basically without using the words, we could need help as a big. We like our committee, but we need a big. Is Robert Williams someone that, you feel like could come in and really make an impact here after this hip injury late in the season?
Yeah, I think
your dog seems to think so.
She heard a train, which is the worst offense.
You don't need to tell me I have a dog who barks at anything she sees out the window, anything at all.
Yeah, but no. To your point, Robert Williams. I think he's a useful player. He's a useful player off the bench. I don't think he's going to start this year, especially given how well Tice has played. Maybe. I think you're right that a lot of the time it's spin. And the Celtics, to their credit, to Ainge's credit, he has had a lot of they have had a lot of injuries. This has been a very
it's been
sort
ridiculous
of snake bitten season.
Yeah.
But we'll see what he does. I think Williams is a useful player. Defensively, if you look at the numbers, he has not been very good this year. Obviously, there's just endless physical tools that suggest that he could be eventually. But for this season specifically, it does kind of feel like if all you think that you need from the big rotation is, another body, somebody who could come in, maybe block a few shots, play 10 minutes in a playoff game here or there, then sure, absolutely. I don't think he's going to be, the answer as a big contributor off the bench in the playoffs this season. Next season, absolutely, I could see it. But this year it does kind of feel like, the big rotation, they've been kind of locking it in with Tice and Cantor, and I think Williams will definitely play, but I don't know that you would necessarily call him, like the trade deadline acquisition, by proxy.
So I didn't hear this, but my producer Evan Valenti said that Bill Simmons, we all know, noted C's supporter over at the Ringer, and so much more than that, he believes that the Celts should have traded Marcus Smart for the right big because this team functions better offensively when he's off the floor because he shoots too much. It's not an anti-Smart take or anything like that. It's just, more a discussion in fit. I'll tell you first who would never deal Marcus Smart. That's probably anybody, but most especially his number one supporter, and that's Kemba Walker.
He's just the ultimate competitor, man. He definitely gets overshadowed. I think his offense gets overshadowed as well. He continuously, just makes huge plays for us. He just does. Shots, stops, rebounds, blocks. He's incredible, man.
So look, we know how much Smart impacts winning. Saw it again in OKC on that late steal. I passionately disagree with any sort of notion about dealing Marcus Smart. In fact, on a recent show, I made the argument that I was talking to Sean Devaney about this, that behind Jaylen Brown, who contractually you can't trade, so he's just automatically at the top, and then Jason Tatum, who everything we talked about earlier in the show, Hall of Famer far surpassing that of Vince Carter. After that, Marcus Smart is the most untradeable guy on this roster. He to me is that important to the culture, to what goes on the floor. He is your de facto captain, and yada, 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 all the things that I've said a million times before. But what do you think? Is there any validity to what Simmons said?
No, I'm with you on this one. Especially when you look at what are you getting back for Smart in that scenario? So you're trading away the guy who, in a lot of ways defines certain parts of your identity as a team. A guy who legitimately could make, he will probably be a first team all defense guy again. at the guard position, and who his teammates and, loudly proclaim should be the defensive player of the year, which obviously is, teammates will talk up their guys, but I don't think it's insignificant that they're so open about believing that. You're trading that guy away for a position that in the last 2 years has been very capably filled by Aaron Baines and Daniel Tice. Like, Marcus Smart is a pretty irreplaceable piece. You're not going to get another versatile guard defender like him. He's just a very unique type of player who brings unique things to your team. If you trade him away for a big, then you're trading him away for, again, a position that has been held by guys who make about $5 million a year. And that's not a knock on Baines and Tice, who have been really, really good, but it just sort of shows that, like, in the NBA, especially in the modern NBA, bigs can be a little bit replaceable, and Marcus Smart isn't. So that would be kind of where I come down on that. I just don't think you trade away the guy who is pretty much irreplaceable.
Your dog doesn't like it either. You can't deal Marcus Smart. Yeah. All right, so for now, this is the team. Short of something happening on the buyout market, this is the team. Has your view of where Boston stands in the East changed at all after the limited activity in the conference? Because, again, the upper echelon teams, they didn't do anything either.
Yeah, so I don't think where I see them has changed much. I think that before the trade deadline, they were, quasi contenders. Like, if things break right, I could see them making, a deep run and challenging the Bucks in the Eastern Conference Finals. And after the trade deadline, they keep winning, and I could kind of see the same thing. I wouldn't say that they're favorites, obviously. Like, it's tough to pick against the team that's winning at a historic pace, like Milwaukee is. But they're still a really, really good team with a lot of really good pieces, and I still think that they could accomplish a lot of really impressive things this year. So, not making a deal at the deadline didn't really change that for me, I don't think.
Okay, so obviously, the people want to know, can this team win a championship? Pipe dream, probably, coming into the season. Now what we've seen, it feels a little more realistic to believe, hey, in the right series, the right matchup, maybe somebody else like the Bucks get knocked off by someone else, because I don't think the Celtics would beat the Bucks in a 7-game series. But can this team win a title? It feels like the East is maybe wide open, at least short of Milwaukee. This is Danny Ainge's take.
Yes, I do think that we can. And, I think a lot of things have to go our way, but I think our team is, it surpassed my expectations, and that's why I don't ever, give prognostications before the season starts or during the season, because it doesn't really matter what I think. It matters what my players think and my coaches believe. And but I think that the fact that right now we're sitting here as the number 3 defense in the NBA at 50 games through the season is amazing to me. I think that's a fantastic accomplishment. I think our team is even getting better. And we haven't even been healthy. We haven't had some of our best defensive players out there healthy for long stretches of the season so far. So I'm optimistic about this group of guys, absolutely.
Again, that was on Boston radio a couple days ago, so the Celtics have extended their winning streak to 7. They've won a couple more games since then, so 30 games left in the regular season. Last night, as Ainge noted, the lack of health, just the 15th time in 52 games that the regular starting 5 has been available. We're talking about Kemba and Gordon and Jalen and Jason, obviously Tice, who has been a focal point and played so well, as Tom talked about before. So Brad Stevens, Kemba Walker, Gordon Hayward, they all weighed in just on the importance of being healthy.
The ability to stay with multiple guys on the court at once obviously is a benefit. Still managing some minutes here, especially with Kemba over the next, few games, and then probably even after, just to be smart about it.
Trying to find that rhythm still. It can be tough. We just had a lot of injuries. But, we're just trying to stay healthy, man, which is tough in this league. Just trying to stay on track.
We have a lot of weapons. The biggest thing is making sure everybody comes with energy, come to play hard, and we compete. And then after that, it's focusing on the game plans, and if everyone makes the right play and trust everybody, we have such good players that, good things will happen.
Tom, kind of feels like we've seen some unofficial load management already sprinkled in these last few weeks. But do you think we're going to see more in the coming weeks to get as healthy as possible for the stretch run? Hell, Jaylen Brown, both of his ankles are all screwed up right now.
Yeah, I think Jalen's a prime example of that. I think we'll definitely see him resting some. And, anybody who's had ankle injuries knows those things can keep cropping up at just the worst possible times. And we've definitely seen some unofficial load management. There's no question about that. Yeah, but this team, they know how good they can be if everybody's healthy. They know that, I mean, that's just incredibly key. And we talked about it with the bench depth. The bench depth also includes how good the starters are individually. Like that includes, Gordon Hayward when he plays with the bench, because, he can help a bench unit kind of keep things moving and keep things smooth. That includes Tatum, because they like to put him in there because he's a go-to scorer. That includes Kemba. That includes Jalen. Like, they sprinkle these guys in, so it's really important to keep those guys healthy, because the bench needs them as much as the starters do. So, yeah, I mean, we're going to see a lot of load management. We're going to see this team trying to get ready for the playoffs that way, and especially, if they don't make a move at the buyout market, then on the buyout market, then yeah, I mean, that's how this team is going to get by, I think.
Does Boston have the luxury of load management, though, or does it have to stay focused on that 2 seed?
So that's a really good question, and it depends.
Thank you.
How
Appreciate
much
that.
You sort. Well, it depends how much you buy into, Philly as a team that can get itself together. Because I will say, like, watching Philly over this last little while, I know they have lots of matchup advantages against the Celtics, but they just aren't that scary. And we saw the Celtics, beat them up when they came to Boston. Like, that team just isn't. They've got a ton of talent. They've got real advantages over the Celtics in certain situations, but they're messy. Like, their chemistry is off, and that really matters. And I do think that the Celtics could beat them in a series if they had to. I'm not saying they would for sure, but I'm saying I think they could. So, yeah, I mean, I guess to me, I would rather, if I'm the Celtics, I would rather have my guys healthy, good to go entering the postseason, than I would worry about, the various matchups or, trying to get to the 2 seed. I think having everybody healthy and going into the postseason with your core should be the focus going forward. But you do kind of see how getting to the 2 and getting that path to the Eastern Conference Finals and avoiding Milwaukee a little bit longer, like that, you could definitely see how that would be appealing to the Celtics.
So I had thought, I don't know if you shared in this feeling, that, this would be kind of a redshirt year for Romeo Langford. Most of the year in Maine, rebuild his shot, rebuild his confidence, but he's been up and he started a game recently, closed that game as well. He's been playing well off the bench, the Thunder game notwithstanding. Is he going to be a rotation player come the postseason, or is he really only kind of useful and valuable when Boston is shorthanded and you need to give him an increased role?
So my guess is that for this year, it's the latter. I think for this year, it's, he's depth. He is, he'll play a good amount of minutes during this, like we've talked about, the load management kind of streak here. I think that that's probably what we're looking at for him for the rest of this year. But, yeah, I mean, I think going into next year and as you start to look ahead to the future, this has been a really valuable stretch for the Celtics to sort of get a sense of what they have. And it turns out that all the things that people thought he was going to be good at, he's quite good at. And even some other things like defense. I don't think very many people thought he was going to be a great defender coming into the NBA, and he's been really good in Boston. So, I don't think that he plays much during the postseason, if at all. I think that he is sort of that luxury this year, but he's proving pretty clearly that he is too good to be a luxury, exclusively a luxury going forward. So that'll be a good problem for the Celtics to have, I think, headed into next year.
So that in mind, are the playoff spots, the playoff rotation, is anything up for grabs, or do we already know what this is going to look like if everybody's healthy? I think we
kind of know. We've seen really good things this year. Obviously a few struggles, but we've seen really good things this year from Semi Ojeleye. We've seen sort of how the bench sort of shakes out against some of the top teams. And, obviously that's been affected by injuries too. But, I think we've got a pretty good sense of it. Grant Williams is going to play, obviously. Enes Kanter is going to play. Like I said, I think Ojeleye is going to play. Brad Wanamaker is going to play. And when you kind of, that's when you count up all those guys, that's 9 already. And that's pretty close to a complete playoff rotation. So barring some acquisition, maybe you could see an acquisition that pushes Wanamaker out of there just because there are so many ball handlers on the team already. You can always use Gordon Hayward as a point guard if you need to. So maybe if they pick up a shooter at the buyout market, maybe that kind of bumps everybody down a little bit. But, as of right now, it kind of feels like they really like what they have with those 9. And, you can kind of see the vision. Like there's a lot of defense. There's good scoring when you start to mix in the starters. There's, a team that could have a top 5 bench and net rating like Ainge was talking about in that clip. So yeah, I kind of think that where we are is where we're going to be.
The Celtics have won 7 straight, and I didn't realize this. I just wasn't paying attention to it until I saw a Sean Grandy tweet. The Celtics have also won 7 straight against playoff teams. Big stretch ahead now. Rockets, Clippers, the new-look Wolves, who are probably going to be trying to figure themselves out. You got the Lakers, the Blazers, and Jazz, and then the Rockets again. All of that by the end of the month. Of course, the All-Star break is in between there, but 5 out of the 7 on the road. It's hard to predict, especially with this load management that we anticipate, but what do you think we should expect from this stretch here? Because that's a grind.
Yeah. No, it's going to be a gut check type of stretch here for the Celtics. Like, I think, if you get out of this stretch, I mean, people are getting kind of spoiled, I think, right now because the Celtics are just winning. And, they're winning games they absolutely should win, which is, really an encouraging sign. But, they haven't been facing the Rockets twice and the Lakers and all these really tough teams. So, I mean, I think if you come out of this stretch, 500, a little bit better than 500, just keeping in mind, like, this team is exhausted. Like, we've talked about it ad nauseum, but like going back to whatever it is, like January 3 or something like that, they've had a game either every night or every other night for, basically a month and a half at this point. That's a lot of games. And to end that stretch with the road trip, the tons of tough Western Conference opponents, I think there will be some losses during this stretch, but we'll get a sense for, especially after the All-Star break, that'll really help. I think we'll get a sense for, how this team stacks up against really tough Western Conference opponents. And, I think it'll be really interesting to see how individuals fare, especially Tatum. There's been sort of this narrative that's floated around Twitter a little bit that he's
not as good as Vince Carter.
I mean, that's been, floating around. Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, there's been this narrative that he's exclusively good against bad teams, that he puts up his, 30, 35, 40-point games against bad teams. And I think this will be a really interesting stretch for him specifically. Look, he's been awesome the last couple of weeks, all NBA awesome. Let's see how he does against the really good teams, because this is the type of competition that he's going to need to play really well against for the Celtics to be contenders. So that'll be really interesting. And I think just, obviously getting a good look at how Kemba's going to perform against, top level competition on this team will be really interesting. So I would say expect some losses here over the next little bit, just purely based on schedule and just weary legs. But, it'll be interesting to see how the Celtics respond and how they, how they kind of fight through it.
I think we addressed most of the questions on social because, again, a lot of just repeat questions, so there was no need to call specific people out. But this is an interesting question from Jeff here to take us out. This will be the last one for you. And we know that the answer is not health, clearly. So Celtics struggled with a lot of slow starts early in the season. Now they seem to be doing well scoring in the first quarter. What do you think changed? So,
and I'm not entirely certain the stats back me up, but just from an eye test perspective, what it feels like is happening more and more, especially now that Gordon Hayward is getting back into the flow of things. I think he makes a huge difference for that first unit. Just his ability to knock down pull-up jumpers, to do that turnaround that he does that feels like it goes in 80% of the time. And just to kind of grease the wheels a little bit, get things moving. I think he really helps in that way. The Celtics obviously build their offense around, three-pointers and layups, but when they're able to have a guy who can get into sort of that squishy area of the defense and create his own shot really effectively the way Hayward can, I think it can kind of free guys up a little bit and make, let's say a team starts off 8-0 against the Celtics and they're shooting threes and missing, it can get really easy to get tight, I think, during that stretch. Okay, I got to make this next one. Whereas if Gordon Hayward knocks down a couple of jumpers, it's just your normal, 8-7, 10-6, whatever start. All of a sudden, those threes don't feel quite so high pressure, and I think that's part of it. I also just think look, the team's getting used to each other. Guys are starting, even though they haven't necessarily all been healthy, they've all played together in some lineup. At some point, Gordon Hayward has, gotten used to playing with Kemba Walker. At some point, Daniel Tice has gotten used to playing with Jason Tatum. We're deep enough into the season now that even if you haven't, even if you're not super used to a particular unit, you're used to the guys, you're used to each other, you're used to the system. And I think that matters a lot too. So, I think it's a lot of those two things. I think Gordon Hayward has a lot to do with it. And I think just as they've, gotten together a little bit more, as they play together a little bit more, it just kind of feels a little bit more natural.
All-Star break's coming in Chicago. Celtics will be represented by Kemba Walker, obviously Jason Tatum as well. Taco Fall's going to be there. Not, he's going to be doing stuff, but obviously not playing in the game. Tatum will be defending his title in the skills challenge as well. Will you be there, or are you going to do like some of these other guys and, I don't know, go to Cancun or Puerto Rico or something, or really maximize your break?
I got to maximize this break. Good shout out to my beat partner, John Corrales. He's headed to Chicago.
Nice.
He'll be checking it out. I will be. I'll be hanging out in Massachusetts with the kiddo. So
there you go, and
nice
and the dog,
trip.
Obviously.
Yeah, well, especially the dog. Yes.
Well, thanks to you, thanks to your dog as well for making it a memorable show. And I think we covered a lot of great ground here. It's just, it's fun to be a Celtics fan again, which last year was not. Those were some tough stretches, some hard games to watch, and a tough team to root for. Even ownership said as much. And so this year, it's nice to have a good change of pace. And appreciate you coming on as always. It's been a little while.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Outstanding stuff from Tom Westerholm, and gave us a lot to think about, a lot of interesting debates, not just the Jason Tatum-Vince Carter one, to take us full circle. I think there was a lot of really interesting little footnotes here in this particular show and talking points, so I encourage you to tell your friends, check it out, and by all means, always subscribe to the show. You can go to our YouTube page, just search CLNS Media, it'll pop up. Of course, subscribe on iTunes, search Celtics or Celtics Beat, we're right there. You can find me on Twitter, at Adam M. Kaufman, the constant back and forth. I love doing it. Love hearing from you guys. The interactivity, it's always a good time.